You don't want to miss this one. We're going to dig into Bitcoin, another series on Bitcoin. We're going to look at the 3 ways you can buy Bitcoin and which way is the best way for you. What are the pros and the cons? Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Control and Compound with Darren Mitchell. I'm your host, and joining me as always, Christina Wyatt. Christina, how are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to chat a bit more about Bitcoin and continue learning more about it. So super excited.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun for us to learn more about Bitcoin. We always tell people if you want to be an expert in something, teach it. I'm not saying I'm an expert on Bitcoin, but just having this podcast, you do a lot more prep work than you do. I kind of understand it, so it's been good. So I encourage anyone, if you want to be good at something, teach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we jump into it, I'm just going to remind everybody, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please make sure you subscribe and leave that 5-star review. And if you're listening or watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you always know when new content is coming out. And don't forget to follow us on our social media at Control and Compound on Instagram and TikTok.
Okay, so again, this series is for people that aren't absolute geniuses at Bitcoin that have been doing this, because some of the things we're going to talk about in this episode, a hardcore Bitcoiner would just look at us and shake their head, right? They believe there's only one way to really do it, the most safe, awesome way. And great, I can totally recognize that. But the reality is, my mother's probably not going to go buy a cold storage wallet and learn how to do Bitcoin and learn how to do that. So are there easier ways that you can do it? I'm not saying there is good, but there's advantages to some of the easier way. But just keep, I just want to say, there's a hard Bitcoiner in your family and you tell him you're going to do this first one we talk about, he or she may not talk to you for a while, because the true Bitcoiners, they believe Bitcoin cold storage only way. But we're going to talk about different ways you can own Bitcoin. And the first one is the Bitcoin ETF.
Yes. So, and a popular one you're hearing about more and more often is the Bitcoin ETF because it's so much easier. Well, easier to get into. I think there's not as much learning that needs to go with it. There's not as much, technicality to it. But why don't you tell us exactly what is the Bitcoin ETF?
Right. So an ETF is an exchange traded fund, right? So some of the big ETFs would be, you can have the TSX, S&P 500, or S&P 500, or the TSX, or the global market. You can have an ETF, which is all those different funds in that S&P 500. No management, right? You're just buying those 500 companies and that's it. You're buying the index and that's it. There's no management picking and choosing. Well, a Bitcoin ETF is basically they're buying Bitcoin or the underlying value of Bitcoin. So it should go up and down like Bitcoin. So a Bitcoin ETF, if you know how to buy a stock or an ETF on your online banking, you can buy that. You can buy the Bitcoin ETF. It's that simple. It would be no different. You just enter the ticker symbol like you'd enter a ticker symbol for another ETF or another stock. So it's really simple. So you're going to your broker or your online bank. For most people, you're going to your brokerage and you're saying, great, I have X amount of dollars and I want to buy a Bitcoin ETF. And that's going to basically track the value of Bitcoin, go up and down with Bitcoin. So there's some huge pros on that, right? Super easy. Like I said, if you can log in your online banking, you could probably buy an ETF, Bitcoin. It's very liquid. So, there's all kinds of money in there, different people. So if you want to sell it, it's no problem. You go online and you enter the ticker symbol and you hit sell instead of buy. And it's regulated in the sense that, it's through your bank or through your brokerage. It's going to meet all the Canadian financial requirements, the anti-money laundering, the know your client, all that stuff. It's going to be heavily federally regulated. So it's really safe, easy way to get into Bitcoin for the non-hardcore Bitcoiners, okay? So
Yes.
again, hardcore Bitcoiners, like, you're going to buy an ETF. I talked to a guy at the Bitcoin conference and I asked him, I said, I just had to be a little, if you had to own a Bitcoin ETF, which one would it be? And I'll talk more about why he actually helped me out with that and gave me one. But there's not a lot of difference among the ETFs, but you can do your own research. There's some great articles and why pick the best why pick this ETF, or what's the best Bitcoin ETF in Canada. Now, in the States, they don't have Bitcoin ETFs. So the exchange traded funds haven't happened yet in the States. Now, there's a bunch of companies that have applied and been rejected, but they reapplied. BlackRock is the big one.
Yeah. I've heard that.
BlackRock has applied for another ETF. They weren't successful the first time, but they've applied. So there's some big companies like that. That's really, I think, going to be one of the drivers of the value of Bitcoin, is because an ETF, it's not, again, the hardcore Bitcoiners are going to be, you're not really buying Bitcoin, you're just buying an ETF, but it's going to be a way that people can participate in the upside or downside of Bitcoin very easily. So I think if BlackRock or some of these companies in the States, they can get an ETF in the States, I think we're going to see an explosion of people effectively buying Bitcoin through an ETF, which, more demand should drive the price up. But okay, so now we got to talk about the downsides. There's always downsides, Christina.
Yes. Yeah. So you talked about the pros. What about the cons?
Yeah, well, the big one is indirect ownership, right? There's an expression in Bitcoin: if you don't own the key, if you don't have the private key, you don't own the Bitcoin. Okay, if you don't have the keys, you don't own the Bitcoin. It's kind of like a car. If you don't have the keys to the car, you don't own the car. If you don't own the private key to your Bitcoin, you don't own it. So in this sense, you're relying on somebody else, right? Now, again, in Canada, we're fairly regulated. Are you concerned that, your bank or your brokerage is going to go under or going to steal from you, and the government's not going to catch them and all that stuff? Sure, it's possible. There's going to be fees, right? Just like anything. People need to manage this ETF, so there's going to be fees involved there, higher fees than if you
That's what
bought.
I was thinking. Yeah, you'd have the fees that come along with it.
Definitely higher fees to buy and then higher fees to sell, and management fees going on. Now, again, ETFs tend to be fairly low fee. I think they're ballpark around 1%, give or take, for these Bitcoin ETFs, and limited control, right? Like you can't buy it 2:00 in the morning. You can't decide on the weekend you want to do this. You can't put money in and take it out on a Sunday afternoon. You can't go in and buy something with that. So again, fairly safe, I think. But you don't really own the Bitcoin. You're going to pay some fees more than if you own the Bitcoin directly. And, there's that whole thing of you don't actually own it, because if you don't have the keys, you don't own it. But again,
well, it's almost like owning Facebook versus having stock in Facebook, right? That would be a similar situation. Like you're not Zuckerberg. You're not making, like with the Bitcoin, owning the actual Bitcoin, you're physically owning it. Whereas this, you're kind of owning stock in it. Would that be a fair
but I mean, you
comparison,
still
or no?
own the stock in that.
Okay.
This is, you're gonna buy a mirror to Bitcoin or a mirror to Facebook. So if I could buy a stock that would go up the same as Facebook or down the
Okay,
same
so
as
it's
Facebook,
even one more
so you're
away.
kind of slightly removed, right? But again, easy way to get in. Now, here's the big reason why this Bitcoiner told me about this. So in Canada, you can't own Bitcoin in your RSP. You can't own Bitcoin in your TFSA, your first time home buyer, whatever government program you're investing in. You can't directly own Bitcoin in there. So you can't do cold storage, and you can't do all those other things about owning Bitcoin directly inside a registered plan. However, you can own an ETF inside your registered plan.
Gotcha.
So the guy I was talking to, he was like, all my money's in cold storage, except my money that's in a TFSA. He had it in a Bitcoin ETF. So if you got money in a TFSA or RSP and you want to participate in Bitcoin, again, we're not saying it's going to go up. We're just saying if you want to participate, ETF would be a place that a lot of people would look.
That's where you could do it if it's in your RSP.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the first one.
Okay. So that's the first one. The second one is custodial exchange. So what does that one look like?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about custodial and then non-custodial. So
Okay.
we'll do custodial first. Custodial is, okay, so I'm going to go to ABC Bitcoin Inc., some financial institution, and I'm going to say, hey, listen, I want to buy Bitcoin, okay? I physically want to buy Bitcoin, but I don't want to deal with all that private key and a cold storage, and I got these 12 words, and I got to do all that. Is there a way that I can do that different?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes. You can go to what they call a custodial exchange and say, hey, I want to buy a Bitcoin. Great. It's going to be roughly 30,000 US or whatever it's trading at the time. You give us the money or a percentage, you can buy half a Bitcoin or a tenth of a Bitcoin. You give us the money and you'll have the Bitcoin. And then you'll be able to log into your account with that financial institution, just like you would with your online bank. You log in and you go, yep, there's my Bitcoin. I can buy it. I can sell it. However, if you don't own the keys, you don't own the Bitcoin. So they still have that Bitcoin. Okay. Now, from a pro side, absolutely, it's easy, much easier, right? It's like, great, I don't got to deal with what if I lose my code, what if I lose my password, what if I forget how to do this and all that. No, there's a financial institution, an exchange that's holding that Bitcoin for you. So very convenient, very liquid, easy to sell. Hopefully that firm you're dealing with is a reputable firm, so there's some level of security. But on the downside, always downsides, you don't actually own the Bitcoin. You are trusting that institution. Please don't steal from me. Please don't sell my Bitcoin. Please don't screw me over. You're relying on that trust factor. And then, there's a risk of what if that entire company went bankrupt? What if they get sued by their creditors? What if they went bankrupt? And what would happen to the assets? Because those assets are they really owned by me? Are they owned by the exchange? I don't have the keys. I don't own the Bitcoin. And then really the last part is you're dependent upon them, right? I need to deal with this institution to buy or sell my Bitcoin. It's almost like your bank, right? You need permission to take your own money out. You need permission from the custodial exchange to say, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to sell it, and you're going to have to do it on their terms and their conditions and whatever new rules they put in place or whatever government controls come in place for these custodial exchange down the roads as far as reporting and what they have to do. You're going to be subject to all that extra regulation. But again, not quite as easy as an ETF, but close, very easy. And then you're owning the Bitcoin in the sense that you own it, but it's on their exchange and they still own the keys.
Which one of we talked about it in an earlier podcast is the decentralization, which it sounds like when you're doing it this way, you're kind of taking away from that, right? We are centralizing the Bitcoin, like we're centralizing it again, which is not something that a true Bitcoiner, now that I'm learning, a true Bitcoiner would not say that that's
Oh,
the best way to do it.
Fantastic point. Exactly. The whole idea of the decentralization was now it's on thousands of computers all over the world, the ledger. You're not relying on your bank to update the ledger when you take $100 out and make sure they do it correctly. Now everyone has a copy of that ledger. Well, now we're going back to that centralization thing, right? Now
Yeah.
we're centralizing all that power or control in the hand of this one financial institution or custodial exchange that we selected here. So yeah, that's a great point.
I'm learning. I'm learning. So what about non-custodial exchange? I
All
think
right.
this one's like the true blue
This
Bitcoin.
this is for
it.
the true blue Bitcoiners. Yeah, these are the people that are comfortable with Bitcoin and how you buy it. And again, when you deal with a non-custodial exchange, they tend to have a fair amount of training set up. Now, if you're dealing with a reputable firm, they have a fair amount of training that they're going to go through and spend potentially hours with you or videos and books and stuff to learn exactly how to do this. But when you deal with a non-custodial, it's just like the custodial firm. The difference is I get the private keys.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I need to go on a non-custodial exchange. Now you can have an exchange that does non-custodial and custodial. They will hang on to some for the people that don't want to actually take the keys, and then other people will get the private keys. So you could have the same firm doing both those roles. But for this exercise, let's just say this is a non-custodial exchange. So that basically means they're going to facilitate helping buying and selling Bitcoin.
So they're educators. That is
Well,
what is that?
well,
what
no,
they
they're
are?
educators, but they're also gonna have the mechanism for me to fund it,
Okay.
the mechanism for me to go buy Bitcoin. They're gonna deal with the actual transaction of the Bitcoin, but I own the keys. So
Gotcha.
basically, let's just say you put 30 grand American in this non-custodial exchange, and you said, great, give me the keys, and you do the thing, you get your own key. Now you have a Bitcoin in my example. You never need to deal with those people ever again. Now you probably will because you have an account and it's easier to go in and sell it. But technically, I could take that company could go bankrupt tomorrow. Okay, they could steal all the money from the rest of the clients. My Bitcoin is safe because if you don't own the keys, you don't own the Bitcoin. They don't own the keys, so they can't access the Bitcoin. So incredibly safe in that respect, assuming you don't lose your password of that, and incredibly private because now I have that Bitcoin. They don't know if I'm going to give it to you or give it to some person or buy whatever product I want with it. There's no control over that versus you have it custodial. No, there's absolutely, you don't have privacy. You don't really have that much control, or certainly not privacy. They know what you have. If the government comes looking for you or creditors come looking for you, they know what you have.
Yep.
Non-custodial, you have a lot more private, and you have that decentralization. We go back to your previous comment is every computer in the Bitcoin world has access to that ledger and knows what's going on. So there's going to be no, worries of fraud and people trying to screw with the ledger because everyone sees the ledger.
Question on this. So just talking about the custodial, non-custodial, what there's fees with the ETF, but like these people aren't just doing it for free either. Is there a fee that comes with when you sign up with these guys? Do like an upfront fee? Do you pay an ongoing fee? Because you don't really have to talk to them again. So how do they?
Yeah, you
make
typically
money?
pay a fee when you buy and sell your Bitcoin.
Gotcha.
So you'll not just a Bitcoin fee, but there could be an exchange. Sometimes it'll be like, okay, to buy Bitcoin through us, maybe it's trading at 29,400, and you're going to pay 29,500 or 29,450. So sometimes you don't see it. It's just you're buying it at this, but technically you could get a little bit better. Some other ones may charge fees, but it's fairly small those fees to get in and out. If you're dealing with
It's not an annual thing that's happening like you'd see in the ETF kind
no,
of thing.
you're only going to
Yeah.
pay the fee there when you buy and when you sell.
Gotcha. So limited fees with
Yeah.
those ones.
But there's also downsides,
Yeah, always.
and the downsides really I think all the downsides can be managed, but the biggest one is the learning curve, right? And we're kind of going through this ourselves in the past year is the learning curve to learn about Bitcoin in order for you to be able to take your key and have your cold storage. It's not something like you can go to the bank account and say, "Hey, I want to open up a cold wallet for my Bitcoin. Can you help me with that? Here's $100." You've got to invest some time. You've got to invest in yourself, and you've got to learn a little more about Bitcoin. And depending upon who you're dealing with, the guys I originally dealt with were phenomenal as far as support. They spent hours with me, teaching me this. But some of the non-custodial firms are going to be, rock bottom priced and keeping costs down. So you're not going to have a lot of ongoing support unless you pick the right one. And I won't. The company I picked was based in Canada. They were based in Quebec, actually, and they were phenomenal. I can't speak highly enough about them. But then you have that risk too, right? Is where am I going to store my keys? What if my house burns down? What if it's in the safety deposit box and someone breaks in the safety deposit box? What if, so there's that bit of risk management you got to take care of. Now I don't have enough for people to come looking for me, so I'm not super concerned. But that's a concern is there's a learning curve. There's a little more work on your end as far as maintaining those in a safe spot, and we'll talk more in another show about how some of the best practices are that. But those are kind of the three ways. You get your ETF, which the Bitcoiners won't like. Then you get your custodial, Bitcoiners won't like, and then you get your non-custodial, and the true Bitcoiners will love that. But those are the three ways. ETF would be the easiest, followed by custodial, non-custodial. When I say not the hardest, it's the most time to learn it, but it's also has the most advantages long term is you own your Bitcoin. If you own your Bitcoin, I can jump on a plane tomorrow and go to Hong Kong and never come back. I own my Bitcoin and I can access my money. If you have it with another financial institution, you're subject to them allowing you to access it.
Yeah, and that kind of the Hong Kong kind of gives me a question. I know that in Canada we do the ETFs here in Canada. With the other two, is that the same kind of, do you know if that's the same kind of worldwide? Like
Yep.
if you that's how every Bitcoiner out there, because Bitcoin's around the world, right? It doesn't just happen here, and they're doing the exact same thing with the custodial and the non-custodial is what you're going to see typically.
Yeah. So
Okay.
let's talk about that, and let's talk about some of the big horror stories, right? I mean,
Yep.
if you talk to
Heard
someone that
those.
doesn't understand Bitcoin, they're going to go, oh, is this going to be like FTX? Or then what was the Canadian one, Quadrica? So let's talk about both those. So let's talk about FTX first. So FTX, for those of you, big American bank went under. Sam Bankman Fried, young guy that owned it. They had all this money. All of a sudden, they go bankrupt. All the celebrities
I
were
was gonna
endorsing
say
it.
that's
Tom
where it hurts.
Brady
I
was
know.
endorsing it. I
I
heard
know.
Tom lost like 30 million. Sorry, Tom. Yeah, you still got the Super Bowl ring still, buddy. You'll be all
I'm
right.
sure he's okay.
Okay, so let's talk about FTX. So FTX was a custodial
Okay.
exchange and non-custodial, but mostly custodial exchange is where the problems happen. So when you have a custodial exchange, remember I said, well, we're trusting that institution to not steal our Bitcoin.
Yep.
Well, what happened with FTX is now they created their own digital coin, but the Coles Notes version of what happened is they're sitting there going, "Holy cow, we have billions of dollars of Bitcoin that other people own, but we have the keys. We're just sitting on this doing nothing. Why don't we borrow against that value, go make a bunch of money doing other things, and then we'll pay it back and everyone's going to be happy?"
Didn't work that
Didn't
way.
work that way, right? The other investments they did didn't go well at all until a point where one of their firms had 800 million of assets and 9 billion of liabilities. So that was effectively $9 billion of Bitcoin, mostly Bitcoin, but crypto and other things, but mostly Bitcoin that, you or I would buy and say, "Hey, I don't want to deal with my private keys. Just leave it on your exchange. No problem." But that exchange, at the end of the day, was really just a big Ponzi scheme. That exchange was taking that Bitcoin and doing other things with it. And I don't know if it was in the fine print of the contract or not, but bottom line, they lost people that lost there were the people that didn't have their keys. If you had been with
That's what I was
FTX and you
thinking.
took possession of your keys when they went under, you were not affected.
Yeah, so the non-custodial people, they were fine because how would they have accessed their money? They wouldn't have. They would have just had the key themselves to be able to access it, which is probably a good point why Bitcoiners do believe that that is the best way to do it
Absolutely.
because the horror stories don't come from, well, at least this horror story did not come from the true Bitcoin way or strategy, right?
Yeah, and then the other one, I gotta get the name of the movie here. So, the other one's local for us, Christina, right here in
Yep.
Nova Scotia, not far from where you live, actually. I think he was in Bedford or Fall River. The crypto king, it was Quadrica. This guy, he started a non-custodial exchange, or sorry, I think he had both as well. And he had all this crypto, mostly Bitcoin, but other cryptos on there, and $190 million worth. People were buying it. He was hanging on to it for them. He had the codes. He went to India for a charity event, mysteriously died, and they burned and buried the body immediately. All the keys vanished with him. No one knows how to access the keys, the private keys. No one has any idea if he's alive or dead. There's a whole Netflix series on that. It's called Trust No One, and it's a docu-series on Netflix where they talk about chasing the crypto king. People are looking for him. Is he still alive? Now, I don't know if he's alive or dead, but his wife wrote a book about the Bitcoin, or there's a book about his wife, the Bitcoin widow, because of course everyone's looking to her to say, "Where's the money?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "I don't have it." And she's still living here, so living in Canada. She says she doesn't have it. They have this computer of his. They tried to decipher the computer to see if they could find the codes, and they couldn't. But again, anyone that had taken possession of their keys, made it non-custodial, those people were fine. It was the ones that held it on the exchange. Those are the ones when he died or vanished or ran, whatever he did, that all that Bitcoin is effectively lost to those people.
Centralization.
Yeah,
Was not
you
what they say not to do
you
is where
you
the
exactly. I mean, and
yeah.
so again, you go back to the origins of Bitcoin and why Bitcoin was started is you didn't want centralized power in the hand of a small group of people, in this case, one person, because it takes one person to be fraudulent or negligent or screw up, and then everything's gone. Versus decentralized, everyone knows what's going on. You can't do that, and when you have the keys, or it's a decentralized thing. Now, I'm not saying every custodial exchange is going to do that. There's all kinds of reputable custodial exchanges, and as Bitcoin becomes more commonplace, and there's going to be some more regulations.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we know there's going to be coming at some point. Like that's going to be managed, I think, better in the future. But there are huge lessons to learn that if you want absolutely guarantee that won't happen, you need to take possession of your keys and get cold storage. If you're comfortable with whatever institution you're buying from that they're not going to do that, maybe you can do a custodial exchange. Or if you just want to dip your toe in, or you got registered money or TFSA, maybe you could look at the Bitcoin ETF. Again, this is what people are saying. We're not the Bitcoin experts, but those are the three levels: Bitcoin ETF, custodial, and non-custodial. The non-custodial, by far, I think, is the safest, assuming you spend the time, you learn it, you learn how to protect your codes, and you learn how to do the cold storage and all that stuff.
Yeah, so we talk about the pros being easy, but like nothing comes easy, right? Like the better things in life come when you put some effort to it. And if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So you take the time to learn it, and you put more
Yeah,
effort into
it's
it.
like
Could pay off, which
yeah,
sounds like it pays off
it's
longer
like running a
term.
marathon. And you don't just go run 26 miles on race day. You got to spend a lot of time training before you actually can run that marathon. Same as Bitcoin. You're going to have to spend some time learning Bitcoin, learning the well, everything about it, but also just the cold storage specifically to make yourself comfortable before you get there. All right, another episode of Bitcoin. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. And if you want more information, check out our website, controllandcompound.com, and you can sign up for an education session with one of our wealth coaches.